Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. And today's guest is Michele Williams. Hi, Michele.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. I am so happy you are on the podcast. Thank you for being a guest. And thank you for, we got connected by Jessica.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit about her as well, but a big shout out for connecting us. And Michele Williams is a speaker, a coach, and she's the CEO of Scarlet Consulting, where she coaches business owners in the creative space mainly, right?
Right.
And, you know, I'm so excited to have you as a guest because we're going to talk about processes and about systems and about what a business owner, an entrepreneur has to have in place in order to be successful. And a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, and they're probably wondering, you know, they're always learning, trying to figure out, okay, how can I make my business successful? So you believe in 5 systems or 5 aspects that each business has to have in order to be successful. So let's dive into it and let's talk about each one of those aspects. So let's start with the first one.
So if you don't mind, I want to give you just a couple of seconds of background before I jump into these 5 to tell you why I have found them to be so impactful.
For sure.
And I worked in corporate and built financial software for 10 years. And then I started my first company in 2000. And at the time that I started that company, even though I have a business degree in information management and systems, and I had built systems, there's something different about taking that mindset and putting it onto your own small business. And I didn't do that. I got so excited about what I was doing in the business, the problem that I was really trying to solve for my client, that I jumped into doing that instead of putting a framework around my business. And I found myself overwhelmed, overworked, underpaid, stressed out. And so I remember having that moment where I was like, I can't keep doing this. I would rather go back to corporate than to continue being an entrepreneur, not having the life that I'm trying to have. And I realized it was because I had not put those same structures into my own business in a micro way, right? Sometimes we look at things and think that's a big business construct, but it really isn't. It was just good business principles. And so I started doing it in that business. I've had 2 other businesses since then and have been putting these into place. And then I help those that I work with do it. So that's the background. You know, it wasn't like I just sat in my house one day and thought, oh, I think I'll come up with 5 systems. It was, where are the pain points? And then I started watching, and it was consistent. And so here are the 5. I'm going to give you the 5 real quick as an overview, and then we can jump in and talk about them one at a time. So the 5 systems that I believe every company needs to be successful. The first is they need a solid foundation. If we were building a home, we wouldn't walk in and just start building the second level of the house. We would always start with a very firm foundation. I work with a lot of interior designers and builders and stagers. And so that is an analogy that they quickly hold on to, like, oh, I see what you're doing there. All right. So once we have a solid foundation, then we have to have an intention. So we're creating a business with intention. Just like, again, in that analogy of a home, I've got to have a solid foundation, but I got to have a blueprint. I can't just go out and start building and bringing in all these random people to build the house. We have to have a plan, and we have to have a structure, a blueprint, if you will, of what we're going to do. The third is people. We have to have the right people on our teams. And I look at team as any 2 people that work together. So that means we've got to work with the right teammates on our team. We might need the right contractors. We might need, and I'm going to put right in air quotes, right? the ones who align with us. We want to work with the right people that are our clients. We want to work with the right vendors to support our clients. Then we move into process, which of course means we need to have processes to manage workflow, information flow. If we call it all the flows, but we have to have a process that works through those things so that we know what we're doing time and time again. We can repeat the customer outcome and the customer experience and the deliverable. And then lastly is profits. I am profit first certified. So I very much, you see my little piggy bank in the back, I'm very much focused on making sure that we're building these businesses that do all those things, but that bring profit to the company so that we have money to reinvest, and that as the owner, we're not exhausted and underpaid, and so that we can hire the right people to do the right things.
Absolutely.
So that's the full overview of the 5.
Excellent. Okay, so let's dive in. I love it. And I also love it that you shared your background, and it's not like something you just invented. It's something that you actually tried and it was successful for you. And you're a serial entrepreneur. You tried it in different businesses, and you saw the before and like the without and with, right? So
correct.
Definitely you need those systems.
22 years in the making, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the first one. Okay. The solid foundation.
Yes. Well, you've probably heard, I mean, we've all heard, you know your why, know your why, know your why. And it is so important. I can remember doing that work all the way back in 2006, 7, and 8, way before Simon Sinek's Know Your Why came out. And even though it can sometimes I almost become like, and just kind of zoom by, it is important. So knowing why we're doing what we're doing, because when we know our why, it informs what we do and how we do it and who we do it with. And so I just can't even stress that enough. The other part that I think is important is sometimes we are so busy trying to build a business for what we think the community wants and needs, or what we think everybody else wants, that we can sometimes, if we're not being conscious about it or conscientious about it, we can build a company that's not even within the strengths that we have and that we don't love. I'll sometimes hear people when they come to me and they're like, I don't even love what I built anymore. Well, if I'm going to build it, I'm going to build something that I can stand behind, that I love, and that I enjoy. And
absolutely.
So
and you know,
really think
that's, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you're talking about it, I'm also thinking about purpose, the why, the purpose, right? I mean, you have to have the purpose. So if your purpose is to do something here, but then you kind of like you started a business doing this, it's a very rocky foundation.
Yes. And so the thing that I add with that why is understanding and then creating out of that mission and vision, but also taking stock of what am I great at? I am a big proponent of the Strengths Finder by Gallup, knowing your top 5 strengths. And so once I know my values, the values of my company, I know my top 5 strengths are maximizer, achiever, self-relator, strategic, and I say I know them and I can't remember the last one. Self-assured. Yeah, there you go. Those are my 5. Well, I'm going to build a business that helps me work within my strengths, my values, my purpose, my why, instead of saying yes to everybody. And at times, at least twice a year, I pull those documents back out and reaffirm them. This is still my why. This is still my purpose. This is still my values. These are still where I'm strong and what I want to do. And I almost use it as a litmus test for the work coming in. Because once you start picking up traction in your business and you become known, people want you to do so many things, but you're not necessarily the one meant to. Can you do them? Yes. But should you do them? Maybe not. And I use it as a litmus test. Does this opportunity help me be known more for what I want to be known for? Does this opportunity move me closer to where I want to be or further away? Does this opportunity use my strengths, my skills, my team strength and skills, those that I'm with? Does it help us do more of what we're already trying to do? Or does it change our energy to help somebody do more of what they're trying to do? And then it becomes a much more very clear yes and clear no without guilt. Like it's a framework for decision making. And that has been huge. So that's the first one, is a really solid foundation.
I love it. And it's you explained it so well. So it is a solid foundation, deciding, creating the solid foundation. But even as important is to do this periodical check that the foundation is still there. And also, not be afraid, I would add, not be afraid to change if it's not working, right?
That's right.
Because life changes, and that's, we learned it even more during 2020, 2021, that you have to be able to change, right? You have to be able to adapt the circumstances around you to what you are aligned with. And it's very important that we also do that check periodically, which I really appreciate you mentioned that. So that's great.
Yes.
So number 2, intent. Do have the intention.
Right. So this kind of leads into it, to your point. So just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. And when we go into working in business without a clear path, we kind of hobble and cobble things together. And we almost become like this an octopus is the way that some of my clients, like, they've got something going everywhere, right? So if you, again, were to go back and think about building a home or building a building, we have a solid foundation, we've got a concrete pour, we've got a basement pour, whatever it is we're doing, the pilings and all of that. Then we make sure that when we're doing that, that we have this blueprint that says, here's how we're putting it all together. And so to me, when we are creating with intention, we have a very clear strategic plan. 1, 3, and 5 years. Now, I'm not talking about the strategic plans that we would potentially take to a bank and try to get money. I'm not talking about the super formal documents that most people say they don't use anyway. I am talking about a usable plan. This is where we want to get at the end of this year. And then how do we get there? I'm a fan of a book called The 12-Week Year, which talks about it uses Parkinson's law. So I don't know if you're familiar with Parkinson's law. We use that a lot in Profit First, which talks about how your resources expand and contract to pretty much your work and all expands and contracts based on the resources that are available. So for example, if I have a project that I need to pull together and I've got 2 weeks to do it, I'm probably going to wait a while to get it done. But if it's got to be done tomorrow, I'm going to find the resources to get it done tomorrow. So we're going to expand and contract that work based on kind of the boundaries that we put around it. Well, the same holds true when we're thinking about our intention of getting work done. So if I set goals for an entire year, I see that it's easy to put them off first quarter, second quarter, and then we're jamming up all this work third and fourth quarter, trying to get it done so we can get it done in the year. And so setting very clear goals that align with our strategy, if we can do them on a quarterly basis, we almost look at that 12 weeks as a mini year, which is the 12-week year, right? So you're trying to get something done, but you're focusing on 1 to 2 small things per quarter. So that's where the create with intent comes from, is taking the foundation and saying, now, what is it that I want to do? Where do I want to put the energy? Where are we putting the resources? What systems are we trying to either create, modify, reform, whatever, in this one time frame? And then we'll move on and look at, the other pieces of how to use that.
Great. Okay, so far we have foundation, and then we have the intent that is basically carrying that foundation forward into action, into execution, by having a very clear plan. And again, not a plan that you use. I mean, that's what I hear.
I don't care if it's on a napkin. Make it usable, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's kind of like, it's kind of, you work with a lot of interior designers. So it's kind of like when are you designing your home to be like a museum? Or are you designing it in order to be cozy and comfortable and usable? So if it's the latter, then that's the same thing with a business plan. You're doing a business plan so you can actually execute your intention, execute that foundation, your core values, your purpose. You can actually work on it. So that's great. So that is basically the foundation, and then what carries us in order to execute it. And now we're coming to the 3 P's, which is people, process, and profits, right?
Correct.
So that is what we need in order to actually be able to continue the execution of that foundation with intention.
Right. Those are kind of, if you will, the resources that we use to make those things happen, right? And they're also systems. Like we have people systems, right? Hiring, firing. We have people systems with regards to how do we do reviews, or how do we give feedback, or all of the things for systems around people. Then we have systems that are just processes and systems in and of themselves, bookkeeping, back office, all of those things, marketing systems. And then we have the profit piece, which is about the money, the management of money, cash flow. So while they're all three separate, they're also very tied together. And so I have them as three systems, but we also teach them as levers, if you will, that you can kind of move up and down. For example, if I think I need to hire this person A, I'm going to write a job description. I'm going to go out and start advertising that job. I'm going to go through an interview process. So you can see processes all the way through it. But money comes into play when I've got to think about, what am I offering them as a salary or as compensation? What about bonus plans? What about healthcare? What is it adding to the company? But then I'm looking on the other side, now how much money am I going to be able to bring in when I hire them? What is the ROI on that? Then I'm looking at, how will they fit into a team structure? Who are they going to work with? Sometimes when I use the three as levers, I might go, where can technology solve the problem so that I can maybe hire at a higher level or a lower level, right? Where is there a technology solution? Whereas without one, it would be very labor intensive. Not trying to create a business with no people in it, but also trying to use the resources that are there to maximize what we can do and the clients that we can serve. I also think the people piece is so important. I mentioned a minute ago that I look at a team as any two people. And so the same way that I stop and take a review of my why and mission and values and all those things, constantly looking at who is the ideal client, what is my ideal solution, and who is the ideal client that needs that. Because as our solutions, as what we do and put out into the world increases and becomes even more valuable or more thorough or more anything, the ideal client on the other side of that can shift. And so we have to constantly keep those together, right? That we are promoting our solution to the person or persons or company that need that solution. And so it's an iterative approach to really looking at, am I working with the right people? Am I working in the right ways? Am I making the money that I need to make? And then under the money piece, I'll say this, that's where we start looking at cash flow. We start looking at a profit first solution. We start looking at, is the right amount of money coming in? Are we managing it correctly? And then how do we disperse it correctly?
Absolutely. So on people, you touched on internal people, your staff, your team, and also your clients. So that's really people, and it makes sense because part of the system, I mean, it's the people you surround yourself with,
That's
and
right.
probably also your CO, your center of influence, your referral sources, the people
and the vendors, because
vendors.
if we're doing construction projects, right, we're pulling in all types of tradespeople, we're pulling in all types of other companies, and we have to make sure that what they're doing also aligns with what we're doing. So
100%. And part of it is also like, we gave a big shout out at the beginning to Jessica Yarbo, and she's the one who connected us, and she's basically your mentor, right? Or a coach that you use.
Correct.
So even being very successful, you still want to get to the next level. We also use mentors and coaches in order to
Absolutely.
help us. And we want to surround ourselves with trusted advisors that we trust. So
no, I totally agree with that. I usually tell the people that are looking to work with me as a coach that they can feel comfortable that I'm also being coached, right? I am looking at people that are ahead of me on the journey and saying, help me get there and tell me where to avoid the pitfalls. I'm going to find enough of my own. I don't need to recreate them. Help me work around these things. Fast track me, because what I then want to do is turn around and fast track the people where I am ahead of them, right? That's the whole goal with coaching and with anything. Just like you don't have the same coach when you start, maybe in your first swim meet when you're 6 years old, as you might be at 16 going to the Olympics. You've got different coaches along your journey. And Jessica wasn't my first one. And, I don't know that she'll be my last. I have different coaches for different things. I just think that that is so important. And it's really great because you don't feel alone. You've got a sounding board, somebody who's been through a good portion of what you've been through and can help you look at a situation differently. I would say even for smaller businesses, it's even more important because I don't have this huge board of directors sitting with me on the day to day. And so I almost have created a board of directors. I've got my accountant that I have these conversations with. I have 2 attorneys that I work with quite often. I have Jessica, who I work with. I have another coach that's about brand styling. So a totally different type of thing. I have another coach there. And I also then have our financial guy, our investment people that are working with to pull, and a marketing team that helps pull everything together so that I'm not having to do it by myself. And the beauty of that, when you're working with the right people, and you know this because you do the same thing, they're flourishing because they're working within their why and their values and their strengths. I don't have those strengths. I don't. I've got mine. They have theirs. And together, collectively, we're building something greater than any of us could build independently.
For sure. And that is beauty. That's the beauty of the people part of it. And as you said, those are levers, but you're really leveraging people. And not just one more thing on the people. You mentioned that you look at your ideal client, and making sure that you have it well defined. It's also good to look at an ideal staff member, an ideal team member in different positions, right? So that's also something that is part of the system of creating good team. You have to also recognize who is your ideal team member for each position, right? Because I like to look at the different positions and figure out like what are the strengths that each position needs, right? What are the traits
separate from the person?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. I heard one time, and I thought it was a great question. Would you hire this person again for this job? So it's a good way to kind of remove yourself and think about it, right? If I were hiring for this role again today, would I hire the person sitting in that role now? Would I hire them again? So that's one thing. But to your point as well, I do believe our ideal client changes over time. Our team members change over time. Our support systems change over time. Just like I said, the coach that I have now is not the coach I started with. So different coaches, like I've had a coach that helped me with sales. I've had a coach that helped me with marketing. I've had coaches that helped me with independent things as my business needed them moving forward. But I also have had different bookkeepers and accountants and different attorneys based on what it was that I needed. And so, when I'm trying to trademark something or work on IP, I have a special attorney that I go to. If I needed to go to litigation, I'm going to go to a different attorney. I'm going to people that work with an excellence within what they know. But I also recognize, just like with the idea of the swim coach, as my business grows, the people that I work with have to go around me. From an interior design perspective, I'll give you an example that we could use anywhere. They have to determine what the lowest level of product they're willing to order and stand behind with their company name. And as their brand grows, that lowest level of entry into the market could shift, which means the vendors that they use to buy sofas and tables and lamps may not be the one that they use in 10 years because the quality or value of that product no longer aligns with the business that they've built. So we've constantly got to be looking at, are we working with the right people to get us to the right place? And that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because sometimes, certainly with employees, it's about then going to process and creating education plans, creating strategies to fill in the blanks for them or to give them a skill set that they might need to attain the next thing.
Great. I mean, that's such great advice, and totally brings us to the next part of this lever, which is the process. So we have people, process, and profit. And I think it ties together. I mean, you have the people, but then you have to have the processes that come with it. Like you were talking about working with the right accountant, the right coach, the right lawyer, etc. That also brings with it the right processes that are being put in place from working with these people, right?
Right. And I think there's also this idea of being very intentional about process. We can, I have been known, if I am not careful, to be almost too process, right? So when you build a process that is so restrictive, then it might not be the best process. I mean, if I were making something that needed to be that restrictive, absolutely. But there needs to be a level of flexibility built into a process so that you can actually manage with it, right? And so you asked me when we write in the pre-show, how I was doing this week. Well, honestly, what I said to you was, I am just trying to execute the process that I've already put in place. And that is the way I want those that I work with to think about process. It's not meant to tie your hands and to restrict you. It's actually meant to free you up to just move through the motions, because the process is written in a way that you communicate when you need to communicate, that work flows the way it needs to flow, that money is managed when it needs to be managed, and that the outcomes you have already considered and are driving towards that outcome. So like this week, I am managing, if you will, my whole process this week is just managed to my calendar. Just manage to my calendar. I might not get a lot of extra things done, but I can manage to what is already on my list because I know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it.
That's great. So now you work with a lot of creative people.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, shall we say, creative people don't see process. That's the least favorite of all the 5 that you gave me. The least favorite one is processes. So what do you say to somebody who is creative saying, well, that's going to squash my creativity, or I'm not a process person. I want to continue running my business without processes. What would you tell them?
So I hear that a lot. And what I would say was, if that were working for you, you wouldn't have called me.
That's a good one.
You just wouldn't, right? Something's not working. And so what I have found, and what I would share with them, is you think you're being creative when you're really stressed and harried and you don't know what's coming next. That's not really creativity. What if I said to you, we can create a process that gives you chunks of time at 3 to 4 hours with no interruptions so that you can create these designs or think through something that you want to think through? Then they go, oh. So I'm like, I'm not trying to now make you so left brain logical. Here's the checklist of 45 things you have to do. It's more about creating a process that works with the way you work. I'll give you this example. My son, both my sons, but my youngest in particular is dyslexic. And so I am not dyslexic. And so the systems that work for me are not the systems that work for him. And so what we had to do, he is very creative. He works in commercial construction. He's a builder. He does these things. But what we had to do when he was growing up to be able to let him flourish was to create a process, if you will, around him that gave him the freedom. So it was small things like math goes in the black notebook. Language arts goes in a red notebook. History goes in a green notebook. Science goes in a blue notebook. Just that. If he knew he was going to science class, he'd grab the blue notebook. So it was a process that then allowed him the freedom to just pay attention, as opposed to the stress of, oh my gosh, all the notebooks look the same. What do I choose? And so that's the kind of thing that I would explain to them, is process isn't meant to stunt you. So it can if it's overdone, but it is actually meant to relieve you and to give you calm and stress-free way to move through your day.
That's beautiful. Totally. I agree. It puts the boundaries there that allow you to have more freedom.
That's right.
Really what it is. Yeah.
That's right. And so sometimes I think we have confused creativity with flexibility. And they're 2 different things. And so really understanding that I can be flexible within this chunk of time or in this way. But if I'm too flexible, then I'm not solving anything, right? Like I had a call today from one of my clients who's like, I need boundaries. I've been so flexible, so creative with everybody in the moment. I can't even create for myself. I can't even get these things done. And now I'm being pulled and torn into 14 different directions. Whereas if she had a process and she put boundaries around that process, she can be creative within the process. And that's what we kind of structured for her today.
Great. All right. Last one, profits. So we're doing all of it to be profitable.
That's right.
So give me some of your main points, your philosophy about profit and about what a business should have in order to actually have profit.
Awesome. Well, one thing I want to say is I look at profitability as sustainability. So if you have profits, then your company can be sustainable. Without profits, and we saw a lot of this happen in 20 and 21. If you were pushed right to the edge and you're working on that $0 budget every time or pulling, out of your reserves, the sustainability factor is very, very low. I also try not to conflate profitability with sales. Because your sales number could be $1 million. Your gross profit could be $100,000. I don't consider that a highly successful business. That is a heck of a lot of sales management that has to happen to have a gross profit of $100,000, right? So when we look at profitability, I like to look at it as sustainability. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what is your gross profit, because that is what we call real revenue and profit first words. That means that is the money that we have to run the company on, not the total sales, because cost of goods and cost of sale takes all that out. What do we have to run the company on? And now how good are we at managing that money? And is the owner of the company being paid fairly? For as much as we hear about these large corporations with all of these jacked up pay, I'm going to tell you there is more in the entrepreneurial space where people are not paid for what they do, commensurate with the work that they do as owners. We see that they tend to pay other people. They're not managing the money, or it's getting away from them, or they don't know how to take it, or they're reinvesting it. We see that a lot. So what I try to help them do is step back and say, could we hire somebody else for your position and pay them what we're paying you? And I would say probably 7 times out of 10, we couldn't. They wouldn't take the job, right? So if they won't take the job, why are you taking the job? So let's work on that. So we really then focus honestly on selling at the right price, having the right gross profit, managing it properly so that taxes are covered, the owner is paid fairly, we have profits to reinvest in the company, and that we're paying our team and staff well, right? And then profitability, and if I could even push it one step further, it's not just about the money. It's having a good team culture and team environment where people come and want to be there. That is profitable for them as people. It's profitable for our souls to be in an environment that is calm, that is exciting, that is fun, that is enjoyable, surrounded by people that you trust and that trust you and that works with integrity. And so if we had all of the financial piece, but it was a horrible company to work at, I wouldn't consider that profitable. So it really is about merging company culture, communication, all of that social consciousness, along with making the right amount of money and managing that money well.
I agree. When I ask my clients, my favorite question is like when we start figuring out where to start documenting processes and procedures, I ask them, okay, what area of the company, if you had well-documented processes and procedures, will get you the biggest return on investment? And I always say return on investment is not necessarily money. Obviously, right. Yes, it has to be. You have to be profitable to whatever you want to do, right? I mean, it's not my definition of profit. It's whatever, let's say you are my client, it's your definition that you are happy and you're satisfied and this is what you want to do. Because that's, again, starts with the foundation, with the intent, surrounding with the right people. So it really depends on what kind of business, what stage you are in, what are you enjoying doing, right?
Yes.
The return on investment is whatever you decide it is. I mean, if it is the hours that you get back, the 4 hours you get in order to be more creative, that 3 times a week that you actually can have dinner with your family, if not every night, whatever your return on investment is. And that's why I'm really happy you brought it up. It's definitely, you want to be profitable financially, but if it's a toxic environment, if you're not enjoying coming to work, well, I mean, honestly, Michelle, if that's happening, then the people part of your system is out. And as you said, those are leverage, you use those levers in order to actually drive full speed ahead. So if you are super profitable, but you hate coming to work because you have this toxic environment, or it's all in confusion because you have no processes, you're really not balancing those. So something is out. So that's going back to your point of the 5 points that have to be in. So you have to have a good foundation, because if it's not working, the foundation is probably not aligning to what you're doing, or the foundation is not strong enough, but you're not using the foundation. So
that's right.
Foundation, intent, people, processes, profit, it's all has to be in at 100%, right? Or at a good high level, so you can actually have a successful business.
Right. And there's a saying as well that says, what you focus on increases. And that's why the more that we can even think about these 5 systems and we focus on just thinking about them, I would say that because I work primarily with businesses that have been established and that are in the, high 6 figures into the 7 and 8 figures, they have a business, they have a why, they have a foundation. The challenge is exactly what you said. They've not revisited it in a while. And so they've started to drift away from maybe the heartbeat of what they originally intended the business to do. And so when I can help them say, I understand that you've been in business for 15 years, but I'm going to ask you to just take a quick pause and let's look back, number one, to see how much we've gained, but let's look back to see if the foundation that you built is the same one that we need to use now. Because if they build a foundation to build a 1-story house and they're now trying to build a 3-story structure on that, the foundation's not going to hold. So we've got to go back and kind of shore it up. We've got to look for cracks and fissures, and we got to fix them. And once we fix them, now we can build up, we can build more, we can do more. So the foundation that got you where you are may or may not be the foundation that's going to take you forward. And so just being willing to take a couple of steps back and look at it, make the shifts and changes, and then continue course. That is that iterative process. We all wish that business was once and done. I think we all wish, created that process, done, moving on. And so when we have to go back and look at it, because you have to get in the right headspace for some of these things to go back into them at that level of detail. But even just every 6 months, once a year, if it's a pain point, going back and working through it. I have my director of operations and success right now. We're going back and looking at our client communication string, that whole workflow, and asking ourselves, are we giving them exactly what they need at the time that they need it to make the decision they need to make? And if not, do we need to change the information or change the timing? What is it that they need? But trying to take that lens of just how are we making sure that we're meeting their need? Because if we meet their need, they're going to keep working with us and we're going to be profitable. But if we're not meeting that need, why would they continue? And they won't.
For sure. Wow, Michele, that has been so informative. So if we have listeners right now that want to contact you, especially if they have a business in the creative arena, which would be interior designers, right? Architects, what are your favorite businesses?
I work with builders, stagers, drapery workrooms, just about anything creative. I've done a lot.
Great. So they're listening to us right now and they want to contact you. What is the best way to contact you?
Yeah. So if you want to contact me, you can go to scarletthreadconsulting.com, click on the work with me page, and then there is a link where you can apply for a discovery call.
Awesome. All right. Very good. Well, thank you again for being a guest on this podcast. It's been very informative, and I'm sure our listeners can take the information and apply it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.